Okay, thank you to everyone who's attending today. My name is Marc Drumm, and I'm an instructional designer in the Office of Distance Education at Westchester University. And today we're going to be talking about online exam proctoring using a third-party product called Examity. Now, before we get into that, as always, I like to plug our upcoming webinars. We only have a couple more here with the holidays and the breaks and whatnot coming up. The next one on snow day preparation is going to be very interesting, especially if you have colleagues or know people who do not do distance ed at all. This is kind of geared a little more towards them and some steps that they can kind of take quickly in order to help salvage some lost time from potential snow days. So this could be very useful to quite a few people, especially if we have a bad winter. Last winter wasn't so bad, but I remember the one before was not great. So we are going to have some more webinars coming up once we get into 2016. I think we just haven't really hammered out that schedule yet. So once we get through that, I'm sure we'll be letting people know. But let's get on to the topic at hand and the agenda for the day. So I'm going to kind of just go through a very brief overview of academic integrity in distance ed. And these are some strategies that can be employed without using a proctoring service. But then I'm going to go into Examity. What exactly is it? What does it do? How do I get it set up in my course? Okay, so now one thing I'm going to be doing for this webinar, which is a little bit different than what I normally do, is I've actually turned on the microphone option for everyone. Usually when I do some sort of presentation about online exam proctoring, there tends to be a lot of questions. So feel free to interrupt me at any time. Feel free to use the microphone in your computer or mobile device or whatever to ask a question, or you can just type it in through the chat box as normal. If I don't happen to catch your chat box question, feel free to raise your hand. Use the little raise your hand feature, which is located, at least in the desktop version, toward the top middle of your screen. And if I don't catch it, then hopefully that will help me catch your question. So moving on. So let's talk about academic integrity in general. So there are some strategies that you can employ even if you're not going to be using an online proctoring service. So for exams, one thing you can do is have a question library. So have your exam pull from a large library of questions. So maybe your exam is going to have 30 questions of it, but you've actually written 50 questions. Okay, so then D2L can pull randomly from that library, and not everybody gets the exact same exam. So that helps in a certain sense. Randomizing questions and answers. So I just talked about randomizing questions. You can also randomize answers as well. So if it's a multiple choice question, you can have D2L randomize those answers so that, the answers to the answer B for one question is not necessarily going to be the answer B for the same question for somebody else. And then I think probably the most effective way is just setting a time limit, right? So you can tell your students in an online exam, okay, this is going to be closed book, but if you're not monitoring them using a proctoring solution, there's really no way of enforcing that. So the way to kind of enforce that is to set a strict time limit. And what students will find, and they'll find very quickly, is that they don't have the time to go through their book or online or wherever it is that they're trying to get an answer to a question and look up all of the answers to these questions. They will simply just run out of time and end up getting a bad grade. So they'll learn that, even though they may have all of these resources available to them, they need to know the material. Otherwise, they're just going to plain run out of time and end up with a bad grade. And then in terms of papers, we have the Turnitin program, which is integrated into D2L, and that helps for plagiarism. So Turnitin is this massive database of papers from other universities and institutions that use it, as well as papers that have been posted out on the internet and are just readily available. And it will just go and search through this massive database to make sure that this is an original paper. So a couple of tools here that can be employed without the need for an online proctoring tool. But let's go into the tool itself. So what is Examity? How exactly does this work? They are a third-party company who have their proctoring platform called Examity, which we have integrated into the university's D2L system. And it does a few things. It will, first and foremost, verify the identity of the student. So is the person taking your exam the person you actually want to have take your exam? Very important. Then while the exam is going on, while the student is taking their D2L exam, they are monitored by a live proctor who will see and hear everything from their computer. Okay, so they can see the student's computer screen and hear any noise that it makes, as well as see and hear the student through the webcam and microphone that are either built in or attached to their computer. So the student gets monitored and everything on their computer gets monitored as well. And then at the end, the faculty get a report of all of their students, and basically they find out what's going on. Did anything suspicious happen? Was everybody's identity verified properly? If there are issues, they're brought up, and you can watch the video of your student taking the exam and look at the various issues that were pointed out by the report. So how exactly does this work? So I'm going to kind of walk you through the whole process of, okay, I want to use Examity. How do I get it set up? What do my students need to do? What do I need to do in order to make this happen? So the very first step is that you as faculty will need to contact the instructional designer that you've been assigned to in the Office of Distance Education. And the instructional designer will arrange to have the integration activated within your course. And when that happens, if you can see this, I'll put a little arrow there. Whoop. You can kind of see right there, the red arrow is pointing to it as well. But a link will appear in your course's menu bar all the way at the end, and it just simply says Examity. And any business that you do and your students do with Examity goes directly through that link. You have to click that link in order to get started. Excuse me. Moving on. The next step is that if this is your first time as faculty using Examity, you need to be trained on how to use it. And that either comes from a member of Examity's support staff or from one of the Office of Distance Education staff. I will say probably 99 times out of 100 that comes from Examity's staff. But if something happens or some issue comes up and for whatever reason they can't do it, we can also walk you through that process as well. That typically doesn't take very long. the training part, I would say, maybe half an hour or so, give or take a little bit. But a representative will reach out to you and arrange a time to do that. And they'll give you a full demo right there on your computer. From there, you as faculty will need to enter information about the exam. Okay, so you've set up the exam in D2L using the quizzes tool already, or at least created and started it. Okay, you don't have to have it fully finished before you can set up Examity, but the instance of the exam needs to exist in D2L. And then you need to decide on the parameters of the exam. So the start and end dates and times. Okay, so when is this exam going to be available for the students to take, right? Typically in a distance course, you want to give them at least a 24-hour window, just because you never know what their schedule is going to be like. Are they available to take it in the morning, the evening, sometime in between? Who knows? But I would recommend at least a 24-hour window. Some faculty give more than that. That's entirely up to you about how large you want that window to be. But you need to define that window of time when a student is able to take it. Then you also need to, of course, tell Examity the duration of exam, so how long do the students have to take it. And then you need to set a password for the exam. Now, you do that both in D2L. There is an option, if you can look at the bottom middle. I kind of put a little screenshot of where you enter the password in the restrictions tab for the quiz in D2L. You need to enter a password, and then you enter that same password into Examity. Now, this is crucial because this is what forces the student to use Examity, because the students don't see this password, but they have to have it in order to begin the exam. So by connecting to Examity, going through the identity verification, and getting started through them, what the Examity proctor will do is they have that password, they take it, and they enter it into D2L for the student. And that's what allows the student to begin the exam. Okay, so by setting that password, that essentially forces Examity to be the exam gatekeeper, so to speak. Okay, and then as you can see right below here at the very bottom in the middle, that's just kind of part of the list screen within Examity for an exam that's been set up. So this particular exam, the first exam for this particular course, was scheduled for 9:15 from 12 midnight to 11:30 p.m. And its duration was an hour and 35 minutes, right? So that's how long the students were allowed to take the exam, and then there's your window of time in there. It would be, I should mention before I go much further into this, it would be nice to show you a live example of this. Unfortunately, I can't do that for two reasons. One, because a live example, obviously I would be streaming my audio and video of me as a pretend student, to Examity as well as to you as part of the webinar. And when you have two programs that are both streaming the same thing at the same time, it tends not to work very well. They usually kind of fight with each other and something crashes eventually. So technically it just doesn't work very well. Then ideally I would also like to show you an actual course where this is being used. But then again, all the students' names and email addresses are listed in there and whatnot. So I'm sure it would probably be a FERPA violation of some sort. So, I mean, what I've provided here is, just kind of some screenshots of little bits and pieces of the screens throughout Examity that you will see throughout the setup process. So as we're moving along. Then the next step is you as faculty need to inform your students about this. So not only do you need to learn about this piece of software, they need to learn about this too. And we provide all the information that they need in order for them to get set up. We have a web page on our site that's devoted just to Examity. There's a manual for students. It walks them through everything that they need to do in order to get set up. It's very important that you give your students as much time as possible before the exams for them to be able to schedule a time with Examity, because you've defined that window of time for them. Okay, so in that example we saw before, from midnight to 11:30 at night, and then they have an hour and a half or whatever it is that you set to do that. They need to schedule a specific time with Examity to take the exam. Okay, so whether that's 10 in the morning or 2 in the afternoon or whatever that is. The reason that they need to do that ahead of time is just simply because that gives Examity a sense of, all right, well, how many proctors do we need to have on hand that day in order to be able to, provide the functionality that we need to provide, right? So the closer that you get to the actual exam date, the time slots for that day will start to fill up. So, a student a week before or 2 weeks before, they want a specific time. They want 9 in the morning. The odds are they're going to be able to get that time because they have plenty of time in advance and are scheduling it beforehand. Student waits, the day before or 2 days before, the odds of that time being available decrease. And they start to decrease rapidly closer and closer that you get. There is a rule that says the students do need to schedule that exam at least 48 hours in advance. And if they don't, if they're doing some sort of a last minute schedule or whatnot, there is an additional fee that the students will have to pay for a last minute examination. So give your students as much time as possible to reserve a time that works for them, and keep reminding them. That's kind of the strategy that we found that has worked so far. I mean, some students are on top of things and they do their reservation early and they're good to go, and there's others who just kind of procrastinate, and that's just the way some of them are. So if whatever you can do to push them to get that reservation in early is definitely ideal. Next step is, so as I just kind of mentioned, they register with Examity. They select a date and time to take their exams. Part of their registration is that they're going to have to upload a picture of a photo ID to Examity. Now that can be either their university ID, their RAM e-card, or a government issued photo ID like a driver's license or a passport or something like that. I typically recommend the university ID, just out of privacy concerns or things like that. I mean, it's got their picture, their name, and then like the student number, and that's really about it. But whatever they have on hand that works for them, by all means they should use. Now, when it comes time to take the exam, they're going to have to show that ID to the proctor. They will literally take that ID and they will hold it up to the camera to show them that it's the same one that was used when they first originally registered. So that's part of the identity verification process that they go through. Okay. Next step. So on the exam day, the students will log into the course. They'll click that Examity link that's on the menu bar that they see. And then they'll be given, there's a couple of screens that they have to go through to select the exam that they're going to take and connect with Examity. When that happens, I'll show it to you. Now, this is a screenshot of an actual Examity session. Now, there's a lot of stuff that I had to blur out here, right? So on the right, there's two kind of big blotches of blurs there. The one on top is the student, okay? So that's the video of the student, right? On the bottom is the video of the proctor, also blurred out. And then on the left is the student's screen, right? So this is what the student is displaying on their computer screen. So right now they have the Examity connection screen web page up in their browser. Excuse me. Now you may notice that, I don't know if you can read this or not, but if you look in the upper left corner of the screenshot, it actually says GoToMeeting Viewer. This whole package is based on the GoToMeeting platform, okay, which is something that has been around for years. It is a very stable and widely used technology, owned and run by a company named Citrix, which is very well known for video conferencing and whatnot. So this is not some program that some guy wrote in his garage, you know, and kind of cobbled together. This is based on proven technology that has been around for a long time, and that is used throughout the world on a daily basis, thousands and thousands of times. Okay, so in terms of the actual video conferencing technology that takes place, you know, it's definitely rock solid. So student and proctor are connected together. The proctor will then go through a kind of step-by-step process before the exam begins. So the proctor verifies the student identity, right? What I just talked about. They have them state who they are and hold up their, you know, ID card that they use to register. They have the student pan their video camera or their webcam around the room. So the proctor wants to get a sense of, you know, is there anybody else in the room? What's on the desk that the student is using, or the table that the student is using? Are there any papers there? Is there a cell phone there? You know, is there anything that should not necessarily be there before the exam begins? And then the student will, or then the proctor will review the rules of the exam with the student. So there are a bunch of standard rules, and in this slide here, I have a screenshot of kind of the standard rules that apply to all exams. As you can see, a lot of them just make sense. You know, you must be alone in your room. Your desk and table must be clean. Your computer must be connected to a power source so the battery doesn't die in mid-exam. You know, no leaving, no talking, that sort of thing. Beyond that, you as faculty are allowed to set additional rules. And they provide you with a list of some suggestions. And then there's also just a blank box where you can put in any other rules that you want. So say you're teaching, you know, math or physics or something that has math involved, and you're going to allow the student to have some scratch paper to do some calculations on or whatnot. You can say, okay, I'm going to allow some scratch paper, or I'm going to allow a calculator, or I'm going to allow something else, you know, that is not necessarily part of the standard rules. And then you also have the ability to provide any special instructions directly to the proctor itself. So these are instructions that only the proctor sees. They are not seen or heard by the student. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of setting up your own rules for the exam. After that, the proctor gives the students access to the exam in D2L. So again, as part of the setup process, you gave Examity the password to the exam. The proctor will then take over the student's computer temporarily, enter the password into D2L for the student, so the student never finds out what the password is, and then hands control of the computer back over to the student so that the student can begin the exam. Student then goes through the exam just as they normally would, a regular, that normally they would take a regular D2L exam. When they're done, when the student hits the I'm finished with my exam button, essentially, in D2L, the proctor gets back on with them then, and they verify if there are any post-exam instructions. So again, you can provide more instructions to the proctor if there's anything that you want the students to do after the exam has been taken. And then the proctor will then disconnect the session from the student, and that's it. After the exam has been completed, what the proctor will do then is type up notes about the session. Now, if everything goes fine and there are no problems whatsoever, there usually aren't any notes. Just kind of something very brief that states session went fine, no problems. If there are issues or things that happen, the proctor will type those up as part of their report. And then that's something that you'll be able to see later on. Once the proctor is done with that, everything that they've done, the proctor notes and the video of the session get passed on to a quality control person at Examity, and they review the whole thing again. So they go through the video again, make sure, hey, was there anything the proctor missed, maybe? Are the notes clear and understandable, and is everything in order? Fine. Then we're good to move along. And so that process usually takes about 24 hours, give or take. It can be less than that sometimes. I think it just kind of depends on how busy things are over at Examity. But what you as faculty will get is you will get a list of all of your students and all of the sessions that they had, and you'll see this screen that basically shows these little flags. Okay, so if you kind of look in the middle of the slide here, you'll see, and everybody gets a certain number of flags depending on what happened. So this particular student got 2 green flags. In other words, there were no problems with the exam, no violations whatsoever. They got a green flag from the proctor. They got a green flag from the quality control person, right? Both people said the student was fine, no problems, they're good to go. If there is some sort of an issue, then they will alert you to that by either giving a yellow or red flag. So at the very bottom of the slide, you can see I've shown a little example of a yellow flag issue where the proctor says at 5 minutes and 4 seconds, they heard some voices in the background. So most likely what happened was they had the student kind of pan their webcam around a little bit to make sure that there was nobody else in the room there. And what the proctor determined was that there was nobody else there, just for whatever some reason there was some noise going on. So maybe in the next room there was a TV on, maybe somebody was walking by outside in the hall and was talking or something like that. But the proctor noticed that they heard some voices at some point and did some sort of investigation to figure out what was going on there. I will say that, typically in the vast majority of exams that get taken there, most students are fine. They get their 2 green flags. There are no issues whatsoever. I wouldn't classify, the proctors as being overly strict. Okay, they don't point out minute little details. If they are pointing something out, then it is worthy of your attention. Now that that's available to you, this report, then now you can go in and you can look at any of the videos of the sessions that the students had with the proctor, right? So if you wanted to go and check out what was going on with that student at 5 minutes and 4 seconds, you could bring up their video, hit play, slide the bar over to 5 minutes and see, okay, what's going on? What happened? Was it anything worthwhile, or it was fine, probably just a TV on in the other room or something like that. Um, but uh, but that's entirely up to you. And that being said, I should mention that Examity does not make the determination about whether or not a student has cheated. Okay, you as faculty make that determination. All Examity does is points things out to you that may be potential cheating or violations or issues that may be aware of. But they are not the ones who determine if cheating goes on. You are the ones who determine if cheating goes on. That's really about it as far as how the whole process runs. Now, in terms of, okay, let's say you want to use this in your course, we do have a few rules that need to be followed, and there's just three, and I want to go I want to go through them briefly. One is that if you do want to use this, you need to contact us at least 30 days before you plan to give your first proctored exam. Okay, and there are a few reasons why we need that buffer of time. Number one, we need to we, the Office of Distance Education, need to get in touch with IT and let them know so that they can enable that integration in your course. Okay, so that takes a little bit of time, not usually too long, maybe a couple of days, but that needs to happen. You, as faculty, need to set up Examity, right? So you need to enter the information about your courses in the program. And if you've never used it before, you have to go, get that training session and learn how to use the program, right? And then again, as I mentioned before, the students need time. They need time to register when they're going to take the exam. So if they have at least a couple of weeks, a few weeks, ideally, that is enough time for them to be able to figure out, okay, here's what time of day I'm going to take it, or the date and time that I'm going to take it. An Examity proctored exam must be worth at least 15% of your student's final grade. So in other words, this can only be used for a high stakes exam. And the reason for that is cost. I mean, that's, when it comes down to it, as you can imagine, having somebody monitor every single student in your course per exam, it can be a little bit pricey. So we have to, make the determination of, if you're going to use this, it's got to be something high stakes and not that, that 5-point quiz that you give every week. Okay. So just keep that in mind in terms of using it. And then finally, Examity is only available for distance and blended courses. I mean, again, obviously, cost is the issue. It's much more cost effective to proctor a group of students in person than it is to do this online. If you're a 100% distance course, then obviously this is the only way that you can proctor an exam. For blended courses, I would say, for the most part, you're probably going to do that in person too, unless you have very few in-person sessions. Maybe you're only meeting in person once or twice throughout the semester, or something, where an in-person exam is just not possible. So just some rules to kind of keep in mind in terms of using this. That is really about all I have for this. So are there any questions? And again, I did enable your microphones, so if you want to try and ask a question that way, you can, or you can type it in the chat box. And I see that Angela, or one of the Angelas, has a question. So yeah, go ahead. Angela, if you're trying to use your microphone, you do need to click the microphone icon towards the top middle of your window in order to turn it on. So the microphone icon that's there should be green.
My audio. Okay.
There you go. There you go. Now I can hear
okay. You. Okay, great. Um, do the students know this process, or if you're building a distance ed course today, would you put information in about how the students would access Examity?
So, um, I guess in terms of, I think there are a couple of parts to this question here. So, maybe in terms of, are there a lot of students who have used this before? And then, if I'm creating a course, then how do I give them information about it? Um, I would say, in terms of, have they used it before? It depends on the department, or the courses that they've had in the past. I will say that the courses that have used it up to this point have very heavily been within the College of Health Sciences.
Mm.
It's especially popular in communicative disorders. Um, uh, there have been some faculty who've used it in exercise science and health. And I'm trying to think where else. I know very recently we did have one faculty in accounting starting to use it. So I would say the odds are that probably not. Uh, I- the odds are probably your students haven't used it before. At least I wouldn't make that assumption. Now, that being said, if you're building your course, then you want to provide as much information as possible to the students. I would say like on day one, so on day one when you're starting your course and you're going through the syllabus, maybe you made a video of you going through the syllabus, or you have something on a content page that's talking about what you're going to be doing throughout the course. Make it very clear to them that this technology is going to be used, and provide the link to that website that I showed earlier. Because on that website, as I mentioned, we provide a guide to them that will take them step by step through how what they need to do in order to get started and how to use it. But there's also some other good tools on that site as well. So some of the most frequently asked questions that we get about it, we've answered on there. And then we also provide a little video on there of there's a mock session with a student and a proctor, so they can actually play that video and see, okay, this is kind of what's going to happen when I do this for the first time, right? I'm going to talk with the proctor. I'm going to show them my ID. I'm going to answer some questions. They're going to tell me the rules of the exam, and then I'm off and running. So I would definitely point them to our website and that particular page. And we've found that pretty much tells them all that they need to know in order to get started.
Okay. I have one more question.
Sure.
I'm working with Lindsay, so maybe I should just run this by her.
Mhm.
Since I am planning to use Examity, and I probably would need the training. Does Lindsay set it up for me?
Yes. So when you reach out to her for the first time, she'll do a couple of things. She'll get in touch with IT in order to activate that integration within your course, and then she'll get in touch with the our Examity representative, who will then reach out to you and arrange a time to work with you in order to go through that training. And like I mentioned, they do a live training session for you, so they'll actually bring it up on your computer and show you all the screens and walk you through the process step by step. So they do a very good job of getting you up to speed on how to use this. Now, after that, if you have any questions or need any help, you can reach both out to Examity and to us. I mean, we've helped a lot of faculty get this set up in their course. I think to date, a couple of days ago, I went back and counted how many courses that have used it so far, and it was somewhere around 20 or so. And we've only been using this for maybe about a year, right? So, and we figure it's going to be slow and it's going to ramp up over time, and it's true. As each semester goes along, we find more and more courses and faculty who want to do this. So, but we've all worked with faculty to get this integrated into their courses. So, any one of us can help you if you do have any issues.
Okay, great. Thanks, Marc.
Oh, you're welcome. Is there any other questions? Okay. So let me just take the opportunity to thank you for attending today, and just to remind you of our contact information there. If you want to get in touch with any of us, there's our email and phone, and we are all, as I always mention, on Twitter. So I am an avid tweeter. So if you ever want to kind of see what I'm up to and what's going on, feel free to check in with that. And that is all for today. Thank you all for attending, and have a good weekend, and have a great holiday if I don't talk to any of you before then. So thank you.
Thanks, Marc. Bye-bye.
Bye.